This guy paid his agency 5K a month and churned because of the same mistakes that most agency owners that are trying to scale are making. In this video, I'll be breaking down exactly why he left and how you can avoid doing the same things in your agency to save these 5K a month clients from leaving you so you can retain more clients and make more money. So this is actually a real review from someone who paid a marketing agency 5K a month for his ecom brand to help them with some sort of marketing, right? If you can look through the comments, there's a bunch of agreement around the narrative of this review because it's very, very common in terms of what happens when dealing with certain marketing agencies that don't have the right things set up on the back end to actually give their clients good experiences. So again, what I want to do in this video is basically go through, dissect this review, understand why this client actually left so you can avoid doing the same thing in your business, and talk about how you can actually prevent this from happening in the first place. Because believe it or not, there are marketing agencies out there that give their clients an amazing experience, that keep clients for years to come. And what we're going to be going through in this video are baby steps in order to help you get to that point. So I'll read through it and I'll try to dissect certain points where there was something going on. All right. So I run a few physical product brands. So he does looks like he does e-commerce. He was hitting a growth plateau, and from there he wanted to reach out to an agency, right? And he took a sales call with a slick digital marketing agency, as he put it. The pitch was incredible, so hopefully they had a really, really good sales process. He was on Zoom with the agency founder. This is important because it's going to come back up later, and the VP of strategy, which is probably just a closer. They showed me a massive case studies, promised to scale our accounts, and then quoted me 5K a month retainer. He signed the contract that same day, thinking his problems were solved. All right. So in this case, again, he had a problem. He needed to grow his e-com store. He found an agency. He went through the pitch. The pitch was happy. He met the founder and he signed on that same day for a 5K a month retainer. And here's where everything starts changing. As soon as this guy actually joined the agency, he said the founder vanished and the VP of strategy stopped responding to his emails. So this is the first sentence that stands out to me from this review because this makes it very, very clear that there's a very, very clear disconnect between the sales process and the onboarding process, which is something that you never ever want to do, especially when the founder is involved in sales and he's not involved in actual fulfillment. Now, later on in this video, I'll talk about how to actually fix these small individual things. But what I want to do now is basically go through this review and just understand these different points that are happening and why these different things are happening, right? So again, the first point that we can see right here is that the very, very clear disconnect between the sales process and the onboarding process, because they said that everyone just disappeared and the VP of strategy stopped replying to his emails. Now, again, VP of strategy is realistically just a closer. So at this point, when he's in the onboarding fulfillment process, he should not be contacting a closer. He should be contacting a success manager, which we'll come to in a second. So again, the VP of strategy and this founder disappeared. Then his ad account was immediately handed over to a 22-year-old media buyer who I later found out was juggling 14 clients at the exact same time. So this in most cases was just his customer success manager. And this sentence right here kind of shows me that they didn't have a lot of customer success. Even the fact that he's not referring to them as a customer success manager, which is pretty standard in the marketing agency. This is 2 months ago. This is very, very recent. Also the fact that the guy somehow found out that he was juggling 14 clients, which to be honest, isn't very, very high. I mean, the retainer is slightly higher, so 5K maybe it's a bit higher touch point, but a lot of people that we deal with, their CSMs are managing 30 plus clients, you know? So this isn't anything too crazy. What this tells me from this sentence over here is that there wasn't a lot of customer success because even the way that he's describing himself as a 22-year-old junior media buyer isn't very edifying of the actual role that this person had in actually ensuring their success, right? So the second red flag that stands out here is that it seems like there's no sort of customer success. And this is further backed on by the second point, which goes over how his ROAS tanked and he didn't get any sort of actual results, which is very, very important. Because at the end of the day, you can give your clients the best possible experience, but if you can't get them the results that they actually came in for, again, he was very, very stressed because his e-commerce stores were not doing well. The whole idea of the agency was to help him out. If you can't help them out, no sort of experience will help you. And this is what it shows over here because their ROAS tanked. Even though you'll get reports every single Friday, which I get for them, it was like their way of doing their client experience. Eventually, he still ended up firing them, which is a very, very clear difference. All right. Then, I mean, for the rest of the review, goes on like the agency model, whatever else it may be. Again, I think we can just ignore that. If you want to read the review, I'll link it in the description so you can check it out. But whatever, we're just going to ignore this for now. What I want to focus on is this initial point because I want to understand and break down exactly why this guy felt this way, exactly why he left, so you can prevent doing the same thing in your agency. And before we go over the actual fixes for these 4 individual sections, let's just dive into a bit more of these individual points so you actually have a good understanding as to why these were actually happening in the first place, right? So the first one is the disconnect between sales and onboarding. This is very, very common, especially when people first start introducing a closer or a sales team, whatever else it may be, because previously, for example, it'll be the founder doing the sales and the founders doing the fulfillment. Now, when the founder starts removing themselves from, for example, sales or the fulfillment process, this is when that disconnect stops happening, because now you have someone that's on the closing team and someone that's on the fulfillment team, right? Two separate teams that still need to coexist. And again, this is very, very common. This is where, for example, you'd have someone that pours out their heart on a sales call, and by the time they speak to the customer success manager, they have no clue who they're actually talking to. Again, we're going to be going over different fixes to actually fix this in a second, but it's very, very common to see this, right? Sometimes we even see, for example, someone closing on the actual sales call, but then not having their first onboarding call from 2 weeks because they don't actually book a meeting. There's so many different things that we can do to actually improve this. And again, it's very, very common, especially if you don't have some sort of structured process, which exactly lays out the sales journey, exactly lays out their onboarding journey, and even, for example, exactly lays out their fulfillment journey. If you have even some sort of mind map that breaks over this, it's very, very hard to derail from the plan, because you have a very, very good understanding as to what's happening next, right? If your closers, for example, have a very, very good idea that in 2 days' time, they're going to be hopping on a call with a customer success manager and going over the business and reviewing answers, that's just an expectation that's set on the sales call. And as you'll see throughout this whole video, guys, expectation setting is very, very important. The other thing that wasn't very clear here is that it seems like they don't have any sort of clear formatted onboarding process, which is very important. Now, the reason I came to this conclusion is because this guy said that he was still messaging the VP of strategy, which again, in most cases was just realistically a closer. If this guy is still mentioning a closer, that means there wasn't any clear structure that introduced the customer success manager, or even, for example, the junior media buyer, whatever he called it, as their point of contact, which is one of the most basic things to do. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the assumption they didn't have a clear onboarding process, something like this, which exactly lays out the game plan for them, what they need to do immediately after the sign on, what they need to do in the first 24 hours, what they need to do in the first 7 days, so on and so forth, to actually get this guy activated. The second thing we'll move to is the actual fulfillment side of things. These are different things that we noticed, but for example, when they said, hey, we get every Friday a PDF report from his account manager, spinning the numbers, but explain why things will turn around next week. And again, nothing happened, so he ended up firing him. And I feel like this is the difference between reactive and proactive reports. Some people think that if they send a report to the clients once a week, that's it. They know they can move off, and that's them being proactive. But there's a very, very big difference between the two things. I actually have a whole YouTube video going over the difference between being reactive and proactive in your agency. And being proactive makes a massive difference. If I could only change one thing in all the different customer success teams that we talk to, is just being proactive rather than reactive. So for example, let's say I hired a babysitter to look after my house, right? And for example, this babysitter, while I'm on holiday, she's cleaning dishes in the kitchen and one of the pipes burst and there's water going over the house. Being reactive would be me coming back home, seeing the leak everywhere and saying to her or him, hey, what the hell's going on? Why is there water all over my house? At that point, she is reacting to what is happening. Being proactive is, for example, whenever that pipe actually goes ahead and bursts, they would just message me straight away saying, hey, by the way, the pipe has burst. I was already going ahead and called a plumber and to fix the situation. So by the time you get home, there won't be any damp anywhere. There's a massive difference between the two. Put yourself in that position and ask yourself, what would you rather? Would you rather come home to water all over the floor, or would you rather come home to a plumber that's fixing your sink to stop mold and, prevent any sort of water damage to the actual property? Obviously, you prefer the proactive, and it's the exact same thing within the agency space, but if not even more emphasized, because every single time you're being reactive, you're losing that trust that your clients actually have for you. You are meant to be the marketing experts. This is why they're paying you money. If every single time now they're bringing problems up to you, then that's going to lower your trust for them, because the contractor, or for example, the med spa owner, or for example, the doctor, should not be the one telling you about the ads and how they're underperforming. You should be on top of everything. You should be the one, that the authority here, that has the trust and knows what they're doing, rather than having to have someone come in. Again, like for example, let's say you hire a plumber and this plumber comes over and you notice they're not doing the right thing. Or for example, you notice a little bit of water leak on the side. If you point it out, are you still going to trust this guy to fix your kitchen? He should be on top of everything. He should already know there's going to be a bit of water pointing out there. He should communicate that with you. And it's the exact same principle we want to provide here. And again, from what I can see in this review over here, this agency owner was by no means proactive, at least from what I can see. And again, sending a report once a week does not count. And the last thing I'll say was, obviously he fired them because at the end of the day, he did not get results. Because regardless of any of the stuff we talked about here, if this agency was able to get this guy amazing results and give him a consistent, a 10x ROI every single month, The sales handoff, the onboarding experience would matter. Being proactive would not matter because the guy would be happy. He'll be getting results. Obviously, you could make it better with a better experience, but the results is really the core of this. And the fact that he wasn't able to get results, and every single week that the account manager will try spin the numbers and explain why things will turn around next week, meant they weren't able to actually get results for clients. And again, this is very, very common. When you first start your agency, you're probably able to get amazing results for clients when you're working them one by one. When you started taking on more clients, employing more media buyers, employing different customer success managers, things started slipping through the cracks. And because of that, it's very, very common for new clients to come in, not be looked after, and they not actually receive results for your agency, even though that if you handle that account, you know you'd be 100% be able to actually drive them results. It's the exact same thing here. And in most cases, why we see this happening is because there's no clear visibility into that client performance, which is something that we're going to fix later on. All right. So now we understand exactly why this guy actually left. Let's go over the actual fixes for this. And in order to actually do this, I'm going to split it up into 4 individual sections. We'll be going over onboarding fixes, we'll be going over sales fixes, we'll be going over fulfillment fixes, and then I'm going to give you a couple of pro tips on other things I would do if I was helping this agency out to actually get them to reduce their churn, keep clients longer, and make more money. The first thing we're going to do is actually fix the sales process because this is where everything starts. This is where everything gets trickled down into the rest of the process. So we might as well start within sales. The first fix that needs to happen yesterday is expectation setting, guys. This is the most important thing when it comes to the sales process and anything that happens throughout the entire onboarding process, fulfillment, so on and so forth. You need to do a very, very good job at setting expectations or at least clearly communicating what is actually going on. The reason this is so important, and I really want to take this out, is because in the review, the guy said the founder vanished, the VP of strategy stopped replying to emails. If, for example, the closer set a very, very clear expectations that, hey, you're not going to be working directly with the founder, you're going to be working with the 22-year-old junior media buyer, which let's call him John for now, with John, who has an amazing track record. He's served over 200 different agencies and he's been able to produce millions in upfront jobs booked. Then that would be a very, very different story. This review would look very different, right? The same exact thing here. The fact that he tried to contact the VP of strategy, which again, in most cases was just a closer, is very, very bad because there wasn't a clear expectation that after the sales process, you're going to be dealing with John, in which in this case is the 22-year-old media buyer, who's the expert in this case, right? Again, setting expectations is so, so important. Within that phone call, you need to break down exactly how this is going to work and how long it actually takes to get results, because these are questions that need to be answered. Even though, for example, it might decrease your sales rate or your close rate ever so slightly, this is something that is worth because people are coming in with the right expectations. So, for example, you don't know if your prospect in a head is thinking, cool, I'm going to be getting results in a week, when in reality, it might take them a month. But if you just communicate the fact that that might take them a month, it's not going to make them upset. It'll just put them in a right frame of mind that things take time. And that small individual change is going to make your life a lot easier, but also your team's life so much easier when you're dealing with these different clients on the back end. Because if someone comes in with the expectation that in the first month they're going to get a massive ROI in the savings, or for example, in the first week they're going to get the first 30 leads, and you know you can only do that in the first month, for example, that's a very, very different shift in mindset. So on these sales calls, you need to make sure that you're actually setting the correct expectations. Because if you don't, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot and putting yourself in a very, very bad position, or putting your team in a very, very bad position. The other thing that, again, I want to make very clear is that there was no clear point of contact in this. This is, again, because they said the VP of strategy stopped replying to the emails. When you're handing over from sales to onboarding, you need to make it very, very clear that there's going to be this person that's going to be looking after you, and this is the only person you should contact. Again, this is what we were talking about earlier, the handoff between sales and onboarding. On the actual sales call, we had the VP, which again was the closer, and the actual founder handing everything over to the 20-year-old media buyer. You need to make sure that this handoff is done in a way that you're edifying, which is like hyping up your 22-year-old media buyer. He's not a 22-year-old media buyer. He's a world-class media marketing expert. He's got 10 years experience or whatever, 3 years experience. He's helped businesses generate over millions in things, and he has access to the same frameworks that we use and instilled into him. You want to actually edify this individual account manager as much as possible to make the process or the handover, sorry, between sales and onboarding as smooth as possible. Now, from this, you also want to do a couple of different things. You obviously want to do BAM FAM, which is book a meeting from a meeting, which basically means at the end of the sales call, book the onboarding call straight away to avoid any delays and any sort of booking issues. You also want to do other small things, like, for example, having some sort of section where your closer can actually add in notes from the sales call so that the customer success manager has some context of the client so they don't hop it into blind. Because again, you don't want to make it seem like, hey, I told all my life story within a sales call, and then I have to tell it again to some new random person. You want it to be a continuation of the existing conversation rather than a brand new conversation with a random guy. That just makes everything seem so much more linked. And again, it's a massive win for everyone. And if you have a good CRM with even, for example, some sort of AI that can automatically transcribe that meeting and pass it into the CRM, so the CSM actually has context, it will make your life a lot easier, it'll make that handoff a lot easier. And this just is all to just make that easier handoff between sales and onboarding, because onboarding is a very, very important part in the client journey. And the less smooth it is, the more likely they are going to be to actually leave your agency and churn, because these are the first expectations I have. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to go through the process. All right. So those are the two immediate fixes I'll do for sales. Again, there's a bunch of different things to do. Let's just focus on the highest leverage thing that we see most agencies actually get wrong, and then we can dive into the individual points after. All right. So again, just to be clear, within sales, what we need to change immediately is setting the correct expectations in terms of how long it'll take them to get results, how things actually work, who they're going to be contacting, who they're going to be working with, so on and so forth, and making a very, very good handoff between the sales process and the onboarding process, or in this case, the closer and the actual customer success manager. And in order to do that, we can do different things such as edifying the closer. We can book a meeting from a meeting. We can update the sales notes into the CRM so that customer success manager has access to it. You can even, for example, get the customer success manager to call the client as soon as they get onboarded to kind of take them through that. But so far, we've got pretty straightforward stuff. Again, these are easy fixes you can literally implement today. This is just a little change to the sales script. This is just maybe some couple of different tech changes, but you can get this done within 24 hours and have a much better system from the very beginning. And again, the reason we started with sales is because sales is what trickles down into the rest of the system. So if you get a very, very good foundation, the rest of the process will also be better. The next thing we're going to be talking about is having a very structured and a beautifully laid out onboarding process. This makes a massive difference. These diagrams aren't just here to look pretty. They will guide you and your client through exactly what needs to happen in the first 7 days, 24 days, 30 days, whatever else it may be of their client journey, which will smoothen everything out. Again, onboarding is the first impression that your client will have of you. It's the first impression your client will have of your company. And it's the first impression your client will have of your customer success manager. And this is where the difference is made from having a random kid as an average 22-year-old to having this kid as a marketing prodigy that's going to help them save their business. And this is where that breakdown or onboarding breakdown comes into play. This is kind of meant to be like your secret formula as to how you're actually creating these chiropathies or these marketing results for your individual clients. If you have a very, very structured process that your CSM is able to follow very, very clearly when everyone knows exactly what should be happening. Like, for example, in day 3, you know this should happen. In day 7, you know this should happen. In the first 24 hours, you know this should happen. And you can actually follow up with the client and actually make sure that happens. For the client, it's going to feel much more structured. And this isn't necessarily about completely streamlining your service and removing any sort of customization. It's just more so about giving guidelines or guardrails to customer success managers to make sure that every single client that comes through is hitting the essential checkpoints and making sure that they go through a structured path which you know is proven. And again, if you already have a couple of different clients and a couple of different client results, you just need to identify, cool, what are the actions that all our best clients did in the first 7 days? And then you want to reverse engineer that to make sure everyone goes through that to have the best possible customers ever. If you do this properly and you're actually able to follow this onboarding process, either through onboarding or even, for example, the beginning of fulfillment, again, it will lead to the client having more trust in you. It will lead to the client having quicker wins because the same process is being followed every single time. Because I'm sure you know, there is some sort of differentiation between different CSMs. Different CSMs do things differently. You don't want it to be affected by emotions. You don't want to be affected by skill. You want a very, very clear process that anyone can jump into and take a client through. And this, again, is one of the things that when you go into selling your agency down the line, this is what they look at. Because this is now your proven system that people will look at. And you know that we can get people results. So if you do this, people get quicker wins, they'll get better experience, they'll get higher upsells because again, clients will get better results, and you'll be able to get closer testimonials because within this process, you can also interject different things like testimonial collections, so on and so forth, because you know when clients will actually get a win. Now, as a customer success manager, if you don't have these different things that you can look at in reference as to where the client's at, it's very, very hard to do because on top of being a customer success manager, you're doing all the other things that you normally have to do to be a success manager for your existing clients. For example, hopping on calls with your existing clients, communicating with your existing clients, dealing with complaints from existing clients. If you now add a new clients being onboarded, it's very hard to juggle everything together. So if you have, for example, a structured process like this, which a CSM can follow and see exactly where the client is at, exactly what they need to do next, exactly what they're missing from the client, it will make the whole thing much more structured and less messy, which again will edify this customer success manager from an average 22-year-old, which is what the guy actually described him as in review. What do we have here? We have a 22-year-old junior media buyer who was juggling 14 clients. I mean, it's not a really good look. And he goes from being that to a marketing expert who can actually help him with his business, regardless of age, regardless of his skill level, because he's not following his own process, which he made up. He's following a structured system, which your company laid out and discovered by working with a bunch of different agencies. And obviously, if you do work in a niche and serve a specific type of client, this also becomes a lot more powerful because you should realistically know how to get your clients results. And if you follow the same process every single time, you'll be more likely to get people results. The fourth fix we're going to talk about when it comes to onboarding is, again, expectation setting. You guys are going to be bored of me actually saying this, but it makes such a massive difference. And this is not something that just happened at sales. And I already covered this, but this is so important. You want to give them a very, very good idea of how long it actually takes to get results. And the key thing here is communication. Because I feel like a lot of people, when they go through this, maybe in the back of their head, they have this understanding that their clients already know this is going to take time. But the reality is that you don't know what your client is thinking. Maybe your client is, for example, thinking, hey, I need leads right now, and this is going to happen within the next 7 days. And maybe, for example, you think that they're thinking, hey, this is going to take some time. We're both on the page and we're both on the same page as it's going to take some time. You need to be able to communicate that and actually tell them what to expect. And this happens within the onboarding process. It happens within the sales process. It happens so many different points. This is something that you need to keep repeating over and over again, because if you have the right expectations and if you're able to communicate those expectations properly, then you won't have any problems with the results coming for a month. For example, let's say you sign a new client and you have this expectation that you're going to be getting them 30 leads in the first week, and you get them, for example, 60 leads in week 3. They're not going to be happy, because in their head, they need to do 30 leads in week 1, right? But if you just set expectations from the very beginning where, hey, we're going to get you 30 leads in week 3 or 60 leads in week 3, whatever else it may be, they're going to go into it with the right mindset, and you guys are going to be the same page as you're going on. Do not assume that your clients are thinking the same thing. Communicate that very, very clearly with them. And I've seen this done through onboarding expectations or presentations throughout the onboarding process. But the clear thing is, you want to install this in your CSM's brains that they need to set clear expectations with the clients. And if they're thinking of something, they just say it out loud and make sure that communication is clear. And if there's any sort of problem with that, you're better off communicating to them rather than having, for example, the client come to you in a week's time and say, hey, why haven't I not got my 30 leads, right? Have those hard conversations from the very beginning to avoid having problems in the future. And again, obviously, this is where having a structured onboarding process like these two helps, because you can clear out individual points where, for example, you see common expectation setting needs to happen, and it just makes sure that actually happens, because you can have it as stages in the actual onboarding process to make sure that your CSMs actually are accountable to actually making sure that you're setting the right expectations with the client. And again, this is not something that happens just in sales. It's not something that happens just in onboarding. It's something that needs to happen over and over again to keep the client on track with what's actually going on. There's so many other things I can say for onboarding, guys. I mean, we're literally just touching the very, very beginning of the iceberg here. But these are two super easy things that you can literally implement straight away. And as you notice, I'm not changing a whole tech process. I'm not installing a new system, which might take time. I'm giving you guys an easy solution that you can implement straight away, because again, this is what would have saved that client from actually leaving. And 5K is quite a lot of money. If they were implement even these 4 things in the agency, I can almost guarantee they would have saved this client, or at least kept them longer to actually get them better results. If you want a better breakdown within onboarding specifically, I've got a ton of videos going over onboarding specifically. I think it's such a point that's really, really undervalued within the agency world, because this is the first impression your client will have of you. And if you do a really good job at really nailing this, you're basically going to buy yourself time and trust that will take you to actually getting those results in the long run. But it's very important that this is done right. And these are 2 things that you can do to actually make that process right. The third thing we're going to be going over is fulfillment. Now, I've got a couple of different fixes of what you can actually do here. Let's get started with fix 5, which is the difference between being reactive and proactive. Now, I already kind of slightly went over this when we were talking about this earlier, but there is a massive difference between this. And I genuinely believe that this is one of the highest leverage practices that you can actually do within your agency, and more specifically within your customer success for your fulfillment process. Again, I already gave the example of the house sitter who's on holiday, the pipe burst, and it's the difference between proactive and reactive. But what if I told you that there's actually evidence that shows proactive customer support is better? Help Llama, which is a customer service platform, showed that 89% of people found proactive service to be a positive experience. This might not seem like a crazy number ever, but when you compare that to see that 70% of people who reported a very, very bad experience of customer success, that difference is immense. That is the difference between being reactive and reacting to a situation. For example, your client coming to you and saying, hey, ads are not so good, to you being proactive and, for example, having your customer success message the clients as soon as they notice the dip, saying, hey, by the way, ads are not so good. This is what I'm having team check right now, and this is what we're working on behind the scenes. This is the difference that will help bridge that gap and actually help your clients and moving that customer success manager from an average 22-year-old to someone who's an actual marketing expert who actually knows what they're doing and can actually help them out. And again, guys, reports, or that weekly report that you guys were doing right now, is not the way to do this. Because first thing first, they're not reading all of that stuff. But secondly, it's not actually being proactive. If you send your clients reports of data, that doesn't actually mean anything. With that report, you need to give them a breakdown of what's actually happening. And more importantly, if you notice the dip, you need to give them some sort of solution that you're working towards to get them better results. If I send you a report every single week telling you about 10 automations that are breaking every single week, that doesn't mean anything. But if I send you a report saying, hey, Here's the 10 automations that broke this week. These are the 10 things that we're doing to fix them. We're expecting there to be some more problems next week, but we're going to be on top of it if anything happens. You'll have a lot more confidence in me and my team to actually provide services for you and your agency. It's the exact same thing here, but we're making sure that you're proactive rather than reactive in the actual communication. And it's a fun little image that shows the difference between reactive and proactive customer support. Again, I've got a whole video over this, so I don't want to hone on this too much, but this is generally one of those high leverage activities that you can begin doing very, very easily. And it just starts with checking your individual clients, see what's happening, and being able to jump on things before they actually tell you anything. Because again, guys, your team right now is meant to be the marketing experts. If they come to you to complain, that's going to decrease that trust. Let's say I was training with Alex Volkanovski, one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, debatably, and he did a very, very bad technique on me. I'm not gonna have the authority to tell him, hey, by the way, I don't think that was that good. Because I'm in my head, I'm thinking, cool, I've got massive trust in this guy. He has a master plan, he'll figure it out, right? But if I were to go ahead and tell them that, and he's meant to be my coach, and I paid him crazy amount of money to be my coach, then how would that make me feel if I noticed him doing something wrong and him not correcting it later on? It's the exact same thing here, guys. A bit of a wild example, whatever. But you need to be the authority, and being proactive is one of these. You can maintain the authority in a relationship. Which actually here, speaking of, this is a perfect segue to the next thing, which is being the authority. In this case, we don't want our customer success managers to be an average 22-year-old with no experience. We want our customer success manager to be a marketing expert. And the way we do that is not by having the client ask different things like, hey, by the way, have you checked this out? Or hey, by the way, have you tried this? Or hey, by the way, I noticed that it adds on dipping. Can we try this different thing? You do not want this to happen. Even though the client might have great ideas, you need your team to be a leader, especially if someone's paying you $5,000 a month, which is, again, depending on the market here, but let's say an e-com agency, slightly higher ticket than other agencies are charging like 2K, especially for just marketing services, right? If we don't have our team being the authority in a relationship, it's going to decrease that trust ask for the client. And if they have no trust in you, they're not going to stick around for you to actually get them with results. So a very simple thing you need to be here is just be the authority. You can do this so many different ways, but again, it ties back into the proactive issue, which is why I kind of link these two together to some extent. Because if you're proactive, you will be the authority. And this comes back to edifying. I mean, everything here is linked together. It comes back to expectation setting. It comes back to the expectations. It comes over to a clear handoff. Everything is linked together in this process, guys. The seventh thing that we're going to do to actually fix this is tracking results. This is so important, guys, especially at scale when you're dealing with a lot of different clients, because the truth is your CSMs is going to be managing 5 different clients. They're going to be managing up to 40 different clients. That's how much you've seen within your agency. And you need to make sure that each of those individual 40 clients are actually getting results. Actually, tell a lie. One of our clients at one point was managing 150 high ticket clients with one CSM, believe it or not. Obviously, that was a very, very crazy period, but he managed to make it work. And he did that because he had the right systems in his agency that actually helped him set up, obviously. But one of the very, very high, easy moves that you can do to actually win this is just by tracking and measuring results on a regular basis. Because if you're tracking results, then you'll be able to actually fix it. Again, this is a lot easier said than done when it's you and 5 clients. But when you wake up one day and you're managing 100 plus clients and you have different CSMs, you're working on different things, it becomes very harder to do. And that's when I recommend applying the CCE playbook, which very simply is just telling you to check your client results on a regular basis, compare those client results to different clients or your expectations as to what clients should be receiving, and grading them to a specific score, and then from there actually executing and doing something about it. This is such a simple playbook. I literally have a whole video going over this as well. I'll link it below in the description. But the whole idea of this is that on a regular basis, we're basically going to be checking on client results. We're going to be comparing them to what the results should be, grading them based on that, and actually doing something based on those results. Again, this is something that takes some time, and it will involve some teamwork to get right. But if you do this correctly and you actually implement the right tools to actually help your team, this is going to lead to a massive boost in your customer satisfaction, because you're going to be able to actually get them results straight away. For example, if someone's getting not so good results, this is something that's going to be picked up every single Friday. And from there, you can actually have a game plan to actually execute and actually get them better results. You can see immediately how this makes a difference between being reactive and proactive. Everything ties in together, guys. If you're, for example, tracking client results on a weekly basis, and you've seen, for example, for 2 weeks, this guy's results have slightly dipped, you can now, for example, implement a senior media buyer or a senior team member of a team to actually do something about it, rather than waiting for the client to say something to you like, hey, for example, I've seen the results have been dipping in the past 2 weeks. What's been going on? It's the exact same process we're having here. And doing this on a regular basis is going to help you and your team to actually hold each other accountable to actually doing this for the clients and actually get them better results. Again, easier said than done. In the end of the video, I'll talk about different tools you can actually set up to actually make your life easier over here. And again, I have a whole video going over how to actually do this with your agency. But it's one of those massive plays. But if you just track your clients' results on a regular basis, I guarantee you'll be able to spot things that you might have missed earlier. And again, if you do that, you'll be able to get them better results, because if you notice the problem, the more chances are you'll be able to fix it. And in most cases, not even crazy fixes. It's just launching a new campaign, for example, refreshing the creatives, having a call with the client to, convince them of sales and help them out with sales, whatever else it may be. But if you don't know that problem, then you won't be able to actually address it, which is why we actually want to make sure we have some sort of system that tracks your client's results on a regular basis. And obviously the CCA playbook is somewhat manual, but there are different ways you can very, very easily automate that. And I've got videos going over that as well. And this ties in back to having different tools for your team members to actually help them out and make it as easy as possible for them to give their clients the best possible experience. The last point for fulfillment we're going to be going over is basically prioritizing clients. And again, this ties into the previous point, right? When you're dealing with different clients, there's going to be different type of clients with the agencies. There's going to be clients that are doing amazing results and are doing great. There's going to be clients where results are okay or it's kind of heading towards the bad direction. And there's going to be clients that will absolutely suck in terms of results. So you're getting the worst results within your whole company. These different clients will need different priority levels, and these different clients will need different things. But when you're limited for resources, you need to make it very clear to your team as to who you need to prioritize. For example, if you have someone that's been getting bad results for 4 weeks in a row, you know that these guys are going to churn at some point. Again, if you can't get them results, they will leave your agency. It's literally as simple as that, especially for results-based agencies. You can do as much as you want with the client experience. You can do everything we talked about today. But if you can't consistently get them results or some sort of ROI at some point, they will end up leaving you. So if, for example, you have a client who's been bad for the 4 weeks in a row, they have not been making any money, they're spending money on ads and not making any sort of return, these guys need to be your number one priority to actually fix their results. And the way you want to think about it is within your clients, are going to be different splits, right? Let's say, for example, one CSM is managing 30 different clients. There's maybe some clients are doing good, sometimes are doing okay, and some clients are doing horrible. These different clients will need different levels of priority. And it's not a strict rule, like, for example, everyone as red needs to be prioritized, because there will be some differences in characters, different types of clients, so on and so forth. But if you have a really good idea of which clients are in which bucket and what specific clients need to see what type of services, which again, you can determine by doing this weekly report check or having some sort of system that does it automatically for you, you'll be in a much better place to actually understand how to actually best serve your clients. And your CSMs have a roadmap of what they need to do to actually give their clients better experience. Now, this is a very important caveat I need to make. Do not just ignore the other group. We're just saying prioritize certain clients. We're not saying ignore everyone else. So, for example, if you just focus on the bad clients, then your good clients are going to be neglected. And you obviously do not want that to happen. All we're saying here is that sometimes you need to prioritize certain clients. And for example, if someone's getting bad results for a week, the churn risk is going to be much, much higher. So your CSM might be better off inputting a bit more energy into that. And again, I literally have a whole video coming out breaking down exactly what to do for each one of these stages. When a client is doing good, when a client is doing bad, or when a client is doing very, very, very bad. If you want that video, subscribe. It might be out by the time you're watching this. I'll try to leave in the description if it is. It's a very, very impactful video which goes over literally everything that we talked about today, but in a much, much greater detail, and exactly what to do for these different guys. Because each of these different groups require different things. For example, for green clients, you can get testimonials. For the red clients, you need to do something very, very urgent to actually fix that. And there's a bunch of different playbooks that I share in that video going over different things you can do for these clients and how you can pass on the green people's results to the red clients to improve your whole portfolio clients' results in general. It's a very, very good video. And yeah, hopefully by the time you're watching this, it should be out. But if not, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and as soon as it's out, you get a notification. You can go through that. All right, guys. So these are different changes that we implemented in the fulfillment process. So far, we've gone over sales, we've gone over onboarding, and we've gone over fulfillment. All these individual things are relatively simple to do. Obviously, they will take some time to actually do, but this is what it takes to actually be a good agency. This is what it actually takes to retain clients for a longer period of time. I can't tell you how many agencies come to us and are keeping clients for 3 months. I honestly, I'm so sick of hearing it, because 3 months is such an embarrassing number. You're telling me that you can't keep a client for 3 months, and bear in mind, this is excluding people that sign people onto 12-month plans and then the client wants to leave in the first month, right? If you're able to implement these for small changes, which for the most part they are quite small, you'll be able to head in the right direction or put your agency in the right direction to give your clients better experience, get them to stay longer, and ultimately pay you more money. The last pro tip I would give this agency if I was helping them out in any sort of audit is that right now the founder is involved in the sales process. And by the end of the sales process, he is not part of fulfillment. So the clients, he may just feel like, hey, the client's disappearing, which is what we talked about in the actual review. It's what the guy said on Reddit. He had a sales call, and after that, the client just vanished, and the client was confused as to what actually happened. This is because the founder was involved in the sales, and then after that, he just disappeared. One thing I'll do for this specific guy is if the founder is involved in a sale, you don't want it to be that complete disconnect between the founder and a sales call, and then on the actual fulfillment process, he's kind of just all left alone, right? What I would implement is so simple, just a one bi-weekly call, not a one-on-one call, but a group call that you can have with all your different clients, where the founder, especially if the founder has some sort of edification in the space. So for example, let's say you're helping med spa agencies and the founder, worked with med spa agencies for over 20 years, or for example, had a massive med spa agency, have even, for example, one bi-weekly call with his founder, just so it doesn't seem like they disappeared and have them still part of that journey. But again, this is just a small thing to add. I've seen this work really, really well for different agencies. You can even have this as its own back-end offer. You can potentially upsell clients into. It makes a massive difference and really does help out when it comes to retention. All right, guys. So that's pretty much it. This is why this guy left his 5K a month retainer and went to the extent of making a Reddit post breaking down the agency model and how bad of an experience he had. We went over why these things were actually happening by dissecting and review to understand why this client was actually complaining. 8 different fixes you can actually implement today to actually fix that for happening in your agency, because you don't want to be that average agency. You don't want to be that person that has clients making Reddit posts about a bad experience they had with your agency, or for example, even bad reviews on your name. You don't want to have a crowd of people that hate you, hate your team, and hate everything that you do for your agency. And these are small fixes you can actually make to actually fix your fulfillment process, keep clients for longer, increase your LTV, decrease your churn rate, and ultimately make more money, get more marketing material from positive reviews, get more upsells, make your team happier, all that amazing stuff. There's so many different benefits to actually taking some time to actually implement these simple fixes, because there's so many different things you could do. And again, guys, even though these are somewhat easy implementations, they're not things that are easy to do at scale, because as you scale, you will decrease your profit and increase your stress level, because again, you're basically based on humans. But there's a difference way between the old way of doing things and new way of doing things. The old way is, for example, you had one pod managing 20, 30 clients, but the new way of doing things is you have with the same pod managing 100 to 120 plus clients, nearly 5 times as many clients. And it's because you can give them different tools to, for example, do some of these things or hold them accountable to doing some of these things automatically. Because again, a lot of the things we talked about today is easy to do when it's you and 5 clients. But when you wake up one day and you have a whole team and you have 100 plus clients that you have to look after, and different CSMs have different way of doing things, different CSMs have different skill levels, different media buyers have different skill levels, it becomes a lot harder to actually maintain that same thing at scale. And this is why we talk about implementing different tools in your agency to actually make your life easier. So if any of that sounds interesting, first things first, implement what I talked about today, get a bunch of good free goodwill from me. But secondly, if you want to see how we help different agencies from all over the world implement custom internal tools to help their team give their clients the best possible experience at scale, then check out the links somewhere in the description. We've got a bunch of different offers running. We're testing a bunch of different things, so just depends what you kind of bump into. Also, I recommend checking out our free school community. Within there, we have a bunch of different resources going over different tools you can set up in your agency to make your life easier. That's pretty much it for this video, guys. Hopefully this gave you inspiration to actually fix your fulfillment process so you don't have a client leaving your review like this in a month's time. And yeah, hopefully this went over the common issues that most people are making. And again, this is common. This is not an individual incident that happened because this guy's crazy. These are things that are very, very common with the agency space and that we see all the time. And as soon as you jump on it and actually fix it before you actually end up growing your team to a point where a fix takes so long to actually do, the easier it will be to install these different things in your whole company compass. And the easier it will be to actually give your clients the best possible experience as you continue growing, taking on more clients and scaling your agency. All right, guys. Hope this will be helpful. If you have any questions whatsoever, drop a comment below. We're a very small channel, so if you have any questions, we can still dive into every single response and give you a proper response. Again, all these different YouTube videos are purely for nurture, for people that have booked a call or for people that are looking to book a call. So if that's you, first thing first, go ahead and show up to a call. Secondly, go up to book a call. But if that's not you, then that means you're basically getting an immense amount of value for literally nothing, because this is not how we make our money. We make our money in the back end by actually giving out these different agency services to different agencies that are looking to up these different customer internal tools and their fulfillment, their onboarding, whatever else it may be. So again, enjoy the value on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment, so your algorithm recommends you more videos like this, either from us or different creators that are setting up this sort of value, which I don't think there's many, literally giving away everything for free. And don't stop at the link here. I recommend watching this video right here, going over how we set up an AI media buyer for an agency. This is again an example of one of those different tools you can set up in your agency to make your team's life easier. All right, guys, look after yourselves. Watch this video over here, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.